The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is Bill Ames, the co-host of the Film Connection, long-running series here on ECAT and Easton. Founded we started about 2001. Very proud to bring numerous people from Easton and surrounding towns who have participated either in the Hockomock Film Festival or indeed have had a career in film and media and related type pursuits. So we have a co-host who is really the driving force behind this whole effort of the Film Connection, who I'm proud to say is my co-host, and Priscilla Almquist Olsen. So Priscilla, why don't you introduce our guest for today?
Okay, we are so privileged and honored to have Jonathan, who goes by John Cortizo. Did I pronounce it right?
Cortizo.
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 Close.
So sorry. Oh,
No worries.
my Italian friends will just get on me.
It's a hot day.
Yeah. And Jonathan Cortizo, you have started out in Canton High School with Ed McDonough, who's the media instructor there, and we've interviewed him, and he has produced so many people who've gone into the film industry. It is amazing, and you are one of those amazing people. So we welcome you to the show, and tell us what the name of your company is, and you are located in New York City, right?
Yeah. The name of my company is Pleasant Oak Productions, and it's the name that I came up with as a 13-year-old because I grew up on Pleasant Street, by the corner of Oak Road, and the movies I made as a kid, they all, for the most part, occurred in that neighborhood. So I just kept on using the name, and it became an official production company, registered in the state of New York in 2022. But yeah, it's always been just kind of like a fun imaginary production company until very recently. So
tell us what kind of productions do you do? What's your target market?
Yeah, so I pay my bills doing branded content, and I shoot for ABC News Studios. I shoot for Nightline and their Hulu show, Impact, and Pleasant Oak Productions. We do creative work, we do commercial work. We also own a lot of gear, and we will rent it to productions that want to hire a crew that come in with their own gear. So that's what we do.
Wow. Well, it's a exploding world out there in the media content. I just look at Netflix and all these cable shows, and the growth rate must be astounding. Tell us when you started. Where were you when you started? You took the Amtrak to New York and said, "This is it.
Yeah,
I'm burning the boats."
Yeah. No, it's an interesting topic of conversation because when I started is a good question. I started getting into photography as a little kid because my dad was a photographer for his high school yearbook and was an amateur photographer growing up. So I actually have his camera. I keep as a memento by my desk. This was his camera he used when he was a high school photographer.
Oh yeah,
It's a
Canon Leica lens and all that, or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's an old FD lens. I've since dropped this many times, so it leaks a bit too much light to really use it as effectively as I'd like. But yeah, I grew up playing with this thing, and that led to other simple point and shoot cameras. And I saved up and bought a video camera in 7th grade, so I was about 13. And then once I got my hands on a video camera, it became clear that I really enjoyed shooting video much more than still photography, as much as I enjoy still photography. And I enjoyed the rhythm of editing and shooting in sequence, and it connects to music, it connects to rhythm, which I like. It's a temporal art form. as opposed to just being spatial. So yeah, I shot in middle school lots of short films for fun with my friends, and then I got to high school and was very fortunate to grow up in a town with a public school that had a video production class as an offering. And the quality of education I got at Canton High School under Ed McDonough, it was on par with what I got at Emerson. It truly was as good as any film school I've been connected to. It's because he's a guy who's always learning. He's always putting time aside for his kids. He's making the edit labs and the gear accessible. So if you're passionate about a project, you can come in and work on it in your free time, oftentimes on the weekends. And if it weren't for that environment, there's just no way I would have been able to make the stuff that ended up getting into the Hockomock Film Festival. There's no way I would have been connected to the film industry at that age. I mean, he connected me to Marianne Franco, who was the head of the Paramount camera department in Los Angeles at 15, and she was giving me notes. And then she got me my first job as a PA on a movie called Surrogates. It was a Touchstone movie, and it was just impossible. Like what I was able to be exposed to and learn it was impossible. But it was largely due to Ed McDonough.
Well, you'd have been very proud of your Canton High Bulldogs when they did this music video, which Priscilla has seen, called "Welcome to Canton High."
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard about it. How would you describe it, Priscilla? Sort of a organized mayhem.
Yes, and it was wonderful, but it was so coordinated with the music and the rhythm, and everybody was together. I mean, it was just extraordinary to see so many people all performing simultaneously together without missing a beat.
And they ran through the hallways of Canton High.
Yes.
And everybody, these students were all on each side cheering them on to the music and the thing. And then they ended up in the basketball court. But there was no edit in the whole thing. It was just, that was their goal, was to not have to edit anything.
They actually...
They did it 3 times.
Oh, yeah. I thought they did it just once.
No, they did it 3 times.
Oh, okay.
They did a practice one once, and then they did a real thing, and then they figured they could do another one, so they did the second one too.
Yeah.
I think they used the first one.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that they could, that the first one worked.
Yeah. So
tell us, what did you learn specifically from Ed McDonough? What contribution did he make to your journey in the film business?
Well, he taught me the foundation. He gave me the fundamentals of filmmaking. And I think nowadays anyone can get into it because of cell phones and YouTube and the internet. I think learning something the internet way is it's accessible. I think if there's a downside, it can be tough to develop a strong set of fundamentals, a strong foundation for whatever your craft is, because there's so much info and you're exposed to all of it at once oftentimes, unless you say, sign up for a master class or something. So what he gave me was a foundation expressed in a way that is very old-fashioned. He taught me the basics, the simplest, most important things first, and then he built on that. So he taught me out of the gate what is the function of film in a narrative sense. In a narrative sense, it's to tell story. And what is a story? Well, it's this mechanism devised to help the audience make sense of this great question of life. Like, what are we doing here? Why are we here? We don't know this when we're born. So stories help us make sense of why we're here and what our purpose is and all that stuff. And if you break down story to its simplest form, it's something with a beginning, middle, and end. It's just an accounting with a beginning, middle, and end. It doesn't have to necessarily draw some sort of conclusion, but it's self-contained. And in assessing an account that is self-contained, you can distill a lot from that. So he taught me that first, and then from a photographic standpoint, he instilled shooting wide, medium, tight, and he taught me that if you're always shooting wide, medium, tight, you're always going to have the pieces you need to get through a scene. And oftentimes, what I do now is work that doesn't necessarily have budget for pre-production. I'm oftentimes kind of thrown into a shoot for a brand last minute, and I know that if I shoot wide, medium, tight, I'm going to get the pieces the editors need to get the job done. So the stuff he taught me is stuff I use every day, and it just became the foundation for the more complicated stuff I learned in college.
So did you break in? I'm thinking about VHS tape and all that. Did you start with 3/4 inch tape and shooting on
Yeah,
video, that sort of thing?
yeah, yeah. So when I was really little, so I was born in '89. So for me, when I was really little, my dad had a full VHS camcorder. So I used that until that thing broke around the year 2000, and then I saved up for a year and bought a high 8 video camera off Shop at Home TV, and
High 8 videos. That's tape. Was that
yeah,
tape?
it's analog analog cassette tape looking thing, and I would connect the camera to my VCR, and I'd hit record on the VCR, and I was effectively editing tape to tape. And the wanted music, I would take the red RCA cable because I was using yellow and white from the camera, and I would take red from my PlayStation. I'd put a CD in there, and I'd play the music, and then play the audio from my camera and the video from my camera and record on a VCR. And that's pretty much how I made everything until desktop editing became accessible, which for me was, I want to say, 2005, 2006.
So you edited you edited with your camera and the
Yeah,
on the deck. Yeah,
yeah,
that was a good way to learn. I mean,
yeah,
start with something as basic. Nowadays, young students, they start right with digital, with all the firepower
yeah,
you could ever
yeah.
want to have.
That's the biggest thing I miss about analog is being able to edit the camera and just deliver it and you're done.
Yeah.
Now you have to upload it. You have to, at least send it to your phone so you can edit it. It's just different now.
Yeah, I started, my little efforts, I started with 8 millimeter.
Yeah,
Then the film I was working on was a documentary history in Easton, and I started getting impatient that there was no sound. So
yeah,
that meant I had to go to 16. And
yeah,
so that
yeah,
was so then I did, like you said, I edited when I first, it was some aerial shots, and the music was playing, and there was the editing, there were the aerial shots, and I matched up the music to the the airplane and the images. I just said, this is the best.
yeah,
It's that magic, as they say, aha moment, that this is
yeah,
creative. And for so many, because you got the sound, you got the film, you got the tech behind it all. It's very cool. So you must have gotten a lot of aha moments back there in Canton High, though, when you were making your
yeah.
first productions and things.
Yeah, it was the first time I had used a computer for editing. He taught me how to use Final Cut, which 7, I think it was back then.
Yeah.
So actually, post production, that was probably a big sort of tenet of my education at Canton High School, was having access to digital post production, which I just didn't have access to.
Yeah. You fix it in post, right? Not the
Yeah, for
operative
sure.
phrase.
Yeah,
You know what that means?
No.
Well, there's 3 phases. There's production, there's pre-production planning, then there's production, and then there's post, right? Basically.
Oh yes, of course, editing.
So no matter how bad, so if you screw up the optics or whatever in the shooting, you can always figure a way around it, for better or worse. So.
Yeah. So, so you learned so much with Ed in high school. What did you learn in college?
I think in college, that's a great question. I learned a lot about the power of a strong network and a group of people who can work together really well in college. I remember we had gone over. I mean, we learned some of the more advanced photographic concepts like white balance and f-stops and exposure and things like that, which I didn't really have a grasp of in high school. I was mainly shooting with video cameras with auto settings in high school. So I really learned manual photography and how it applies to filmmaking in college. And we edited on Steenbeck. We shot 16 and Super 16. Um, it was right before digital took off when I was there. So I went to Emerson from 2008 to 2011. And when I graduated, I think it was the last semester or so, Shane Hurlbert, who kind of pioneered DSLR filmmaking as a DP in many ways, he came to our school because he had been an Emerson graduate, and he introduced the 5D to us and showed us a movie he shot on it, and basically, prophesized that digital was going to totally change everything. And he was completely right. So by the time I got into college, most of the thesis films were shot on film, and by the time I graduated from college, the vast majority were shot digitally on 5Ds and 7Ds. So the business changed completely. I mean, while I was there, it was like the big pivot point of the industry from analog to digital while I was in school. So I learned a lot of stuff about film that I really didn't use when I started working as a professional, because everything had switched over to digital. By the time I got out, I mean, a few filmmakers were still using film, but there was a massive push to get away from Betacam and from anything analog to switching to Alexa and digital, and Sony had their Genesis and their F-35. It was sort of the dawn of it, and the irony of right now is, whatever it is now, 10 or 15 years later, there's a big push back toward film amongst film.
Interesting you say that, because we were talking to somebody and they were about film schools, and I swear to God, they said that at the Harvard Film School or some film school, they teach with Steenbecks and 16 millimeter film. That's the building blocks, because the editing systems are so there's so many different commands and everything. You get obsessed with the software, but if you're doing 16 millimeter on a Steenbeck machine, it really takes it right down to the basics of shooting. So when you're shooting the shot, you better be right, because you can't fix it in post to the extent that you can with software. I mean, you can put magic. So I found that pretty interesting, the 16 millimeter Steenbeck.
Oh yeah, I was just in Los Angeles last week at the American Society of Cinematographers Clubhouse doing like a week-long workshop, and we had some people come in from Kodak and from Photochem, and right now there's more film being manufactured because of the demand for film right now than there's been in the last several years, and I think for a number of reasons, a lot of and the people pushing this uptick in film are folks in their late 20s, 30s, and early 40s. So it's a lot of young people, and there does appear to be this reaction to digitalism, where at least in the filmmaking universe, people are trying to engage in a process that's more tactile and more tangible than just hitting record. So it's going to be interesting to see where things land 10 years from now. We might see film evaporate. I don't think we will. Or we might see film take off because people are just, kind of tired of everything being digitized.
Yeah, as I recall, what you did was you shot it in film, then you took it down to Do Art or someplace in Boston, and they develop it, and then they give you what they called a work print, right?
Yep.
Which had the numbers. The idea being that you didn't want to play around, if you were sort of an amateur like I was, you didn't want to play around with real color film, because one mistake and you've lost a key frame, and it's noticeable. But the work print was a black and white identical copy, and it had what do they call them, edge numbers or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's how you could do it. And then it was sort of, then you had to hire a professional editor, and so you give them the work print and you give them the raw footage, and $900 later or whatever it was, you'd get it back. But it sort of saved a lot of aggravation. If you didn't know how to do the cement, the chopper and the putting them together and stuff like that, you had to have real patience to do that.
Oh yeah.
Because if you weren't patient, got too hard, you'd screw it up, quality wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. That's actually one of the great lessons I learned from Emerson. Was we shot? I remember when I was there, you shot 2 movies on the Bolex in film 1, which is Intro to Film. And I remember the first movie I did, shot the thing, got my negative back, and I tried to figure out what the movie was gonna be like just by editing the negative, no work print or anything like that. And I remember the finished piece was really scratched up and beat up because I, workshopped it, and I got really kind of bummed out because it was so much money. So the next Bolex movie I had to do, I shot it and then scanned the film and made a digital work print, which was not something that was instructed and wasn't something that I was necessarily allowed to do, but I was just trying to protect my investment. So I edited that digital version on my computer. And then once I figured out what I wanted it to look like, I went back to the negative and just cut the negative. And I got kind of a slap on the wrist for that, because I guess the point of it was to figure it out on the scene deck. But in hindsight, that's just how everyone operated. It's like you create a work print first so you don't destroy your negative.
Yeah. Well, I had my great transformation to digital when I had this Bolex, and I was shooting some scenes in England. It was a documentary about my family, where my family was from, so I was, definitely an amateur.
Yeah.
So I had the Bolex, and the Bolex, was mechanical, and things didn't always go right. You had to wind it up or something like that, And I also had a digital. So I had a real meltdown after a certain point, and I took the Bolex and I threw it in the river. So it's at the bottom of a river in England now. Because I was conflicted, because learning the digital seemed more complicated. You know what I mean? I had to learn how to do all that stuff, and so I was a little nervous about it, going from the Bolex. So I said, the heck with it, and threw the Bolex in the river. My sister was outraged because she was working with me on the project. She said, "You threw that Bolex in the river?" So anyway, everybody's got a story like that, right? When you reach the end of your rope, and you got to adapt to the future,
So, John, tell us a little bit about how the struggle was in the beginning when you moved to New York City. What did you have to do to pay the bills? How long did it take? What motivated you? You obviously kept going, sticking with it. You were persevering. So tell us a little bit about that. That period in your life.
Yeah. So I started working professionally at 19, and it was by way of Marianne Franco, who was introduced to me by Ed McDonough while I was a high school student. So really, my journey started at his class. I graduated from Canton High School, and that summer, going into Suffolk University, I don't remember what I did for work. I think I was working on a golf course or something, and I could not get into Emerson my first shot. I was turned down. So I went to Suffolk University because it was next door to Emerson, and I just made it a point to do as well as I could academically so I could get in on transfer to Emerson. So did that for a year. Was waitlisted when I tried to transfer into Emerson. That summer when I was waitlisted, I remember I interviewed to work on a horror movie somewhere, I think near Framingham or something like that. And I got this weird feeling about the production in general. and I think if there are like other kids working on watching this show, they'll probably encounter this where you'll interview for a film project and you just get like a weird feeling about like how it's being run. And I remember driving back from the interview and just not feeling good about it. And then I remember I turned around in the car and went back and was like, I'm so sorry, I can't do this. Because I think they offered me the job on the spot as a PA. And it was just this feeling. And then I remember a few days later, I got a phone call from someone who was working on a big Bruce Willis movie in Boston. And they offered me a job. And had I taken the initial job, I wouldn't have gotten that job on the studio film. And that film is what got me into the studio universe. It was called Surrogates. It was directed by Jonathan Mostow, who did U571 and one of the Terminator movies. And I met really the foundation of the people who comprised my film network professionally on that movie. It was just a big Boston movie, and everyone who worked in Boston professionally was on it in the union sort of world. So I just worked as a PA, and I remember I was an additional PA, which meant I wasn't on staff. I was just called whenever they needed extra hands. And because it was a big action movie, they always needed help. So they called me for, a bunch of shoot days, probably close to 40, all on location. And then when the location phase of the movie ended, we had gone to stage work. We built a sound stage in like a couple of warehouses in Woburn somewhere. And the additional PAs were supposed to be released at that point, but they kept me on because I knew the golf courses in the area really well. And I was responsible for setting up golf outings for
Go start somewhere.
yeah. And that is the only reason why I was held on to the very end of the movie. So I was an additional PA on stage with them. And when that movie concluded, I had gotten my acceptance letter to Emerson, so I was able to go there my sophomore year. And then the following summer, another movie came to town. It was called Furry Vengeance. It was a kid's movie with animals, and Brendan Fraser was in it, Brooke Shields, and it was a comedy. And yeah, I worked as an office PA on that because I had stayed in touch with the folks I met on Surrogates. After that, I did my junior year at Emerson. And then the summer going into my senior year, the location manager on Furry Vengeance and Surrogates ran into me on campus at Emerson. He was just walking around Boston Commons, and I walked into him by chance. And he said, "What are you doing this summer?" And I said, "I don't have anything yet." And he said, "Okay, I need someone to help me with this show. It's NDA, so I can't talk about it yet, but I'll get you on the NDA and let you know what it is." So I signed the NDA, and it was Amazing Race. So I worked on Amazing Race with him, which led to 2 more seasons. So by the time I graduated from college, I already worked on 3 big productions professionally as an assistant. So I got out of school, and I would do Amazing Race in the summer. And then for the 3/4 of the year that wasn't summer, I was working on The Good Wife as a camera assistant. First as a camera PA, and then as a second AC, or a loader rather. Because the first AC on The Good Wife was an AC on both Furry Vengeance and Surrogates. So it all goes back to that network I made working as a PA on those Boston movies. And he was working on Good Wife. It was in New York. So because I had that job offer, I moved down to New York. I lived with my grandfather in his living room and paid $300 a month for rent to live in his living room. Well, I tried to pay down my Emerson College student loans.
Yeah.
And I worked on Good Wife for 3 seasons. And I assisted a director of photography named Fred Murphy, who had shot October Sky and Hoosiers and a number of other movies, and learned from him. And then by the end of my 3 years there, which was roughly 2014, I got to a point where I just really missed the creative side of things that I learned in McDonough's class. And by the time 2014, video production on the internet was exploding. When I was in college, there was no video market for the internet really. And by 2014, with Facebook video and Vimeo and YouTube, suddenly all of these brands were producing their own video content that stood somewhere between commercials and TV shows. And I saw a lot of people my age working as shooters and as editors with C300s and FS7s and things like that. So I made the switch, and I bought a C100 and started shooting for a bunch of those, internet brands, magazines really. And yeah, a lot of those brands are brands that continue to pay my bills today. So since then, I guess I've been doing that for 10 years. You meet people and other opportunities pop up, and the industry and the technology around it is changing so incredibly rapidly that at this point it's really difficult to forecast where you're going to be even 6 months from now. So I'm in it now, but I'm just trying to appreciate it while it lasts, because with the last election, you saw Facebook go from supporting lots of video content, which I still do, but I think with TikTok and with the political environment, you saw people sharing and consuming 16:9, 2 to 5 minute long videos on Facebook 10 years ago, and you don't see that nearly as much now. It's TikTok style reels, things like that. So there's just no way to really accurately predict where things are going to go.
Well, you had getting back to your Emerson thing, you had Emerson has quite a well-known network of graduates, right, who sort of help each other out. And we've heard a bunch of Emerson people on the show talking about how that had been very helpful. It's like in any, college or whatever, but I guess Emerson was sort of a bit of a pioneer, right, way back when they started focusing on emphasizing cinema and production and things like that. Because I don't know how Emerson got started, but I think it was sort of a theatrical type school or something where you learn theater or whatever as well as liberal arts. But someone said that Emerson had apartments in Los Angeles where interns used to go to when they had employment at these movie studios and everything. Did you ever do that, or were you just always based in Boston?
When I first graduated from college, I moved to California to work on Amazing Race. That was the first job I got after school. So I lived out there very briefly, but it was only for a couple months. And then Good Wife came through, and I moved back to New York.
Yeah.
So, but I believe it. I mean, it's definitely a very well connected network for sure.
Well, you were mentioning about predicting the future, so that gets us to our favorite question on this show, which is, what about AI? How is AI going to influence your choices and what you do?
Well, I think AI, is a mechanism for conveying an idea, but I don't think it will supplant. I mean, who the hell knows? But I mean, ultimately, you watch a movie or listen to or engage in any piece of art to feel a sense of connection and to make sense of why we're here. And perhaps AI can do that. I won't discount it. But given the trend of this sort of resurgence of film, and see people buying vinyl again, I do wonder if there is a degree to which people just become oversaturated with digitalism, and I wonder if people will just naturally gravitate towards, works of art that are made by people, even if they're using AI, maybe in some limited effect.
Well, AI certainly can generate ideas in terms of people writing scripts and things like that. That's why I say I do see, because I sort of get a lot of email newsletters and whatever. A lot of content in these newsletters is about using AI to create videos. I haven't bothered to follow up on it, so I really don't know what. But I don't see how you can use an AI to create a video, but clearly some types of video you can. I guess if you want to talk about a bridge, there's the Golden Gate Bridge. Talk about a road through a farm, suddenly there's the farm connected to the Golden Gate Bridge, right? Something like that. And then you just take it and edit the thing as you feel lit.
Yeah. I can. I mean, who knows with the way like the WGA has put a bunch of safeguards in their last contract against people using AI. Like you can't ask AI to take a bunch of your scripts and write another script with your voice.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the unions do and how AI plays out on the studio level, but at the amateur level or the independent level, I can't imagine over time people not using those tools in ways that just make their lives easier.
Absolutely. And
so, Jonathan, tell us a little bit about some of the highlights of your career. When you think about what gave you the most joy or amazement, excitement, give us a few examples if you can.
Yeah, I think I'm going way back to when I was a kid. I mean, the joy in it came from just making. It was just a way to hang out with my friends. It was a way to make friends and hang out with them. And it was a way to connect with people when they watched your piece in ways that were just different from normal conversation. So I think that to me is the big highlight is the social aspect of it. And as I've gotten older, it's pretty similar. I work as a freelancer, so I don't have a regular group of coworkers around me. My wife does, so she's got people around her that she's worked with for a long time. But I don't really have that. I don't see them every day, at least. So yeah, any chance I get to be on a job, whatever it is, and spend time with folks I enjoy being around who are respecting each other. That's kind of the big win. And when the paycheck comes through and you get to pay your bills that month doing that, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time doing jobs I didn't want to do, and I still have to do jobs every now and then that I don't want to do. So when you have those moments that are enjoyable, they stand out more.
So where do you live? You live in Manhattan or New York City?
Yeah, I live close to Manhattan. I live on an island in the East River called Roosevelt Island, and it's where they used to send people with smallpox back in the day.
Is that one of those big apartment buildings?
Yep.
So what's your view? What's your view out the window? Do you see the East River and?
Yeah. Yep. If I go downstairs, I see the East River, and one of my windows faces Queens, so I can actually see Silver Cup Studio from where I am.
Yeah.
So smack between Queens and Manhattan.
They had sort of a gondola years ago, I think, that you could.
Yeah.
They still have that.
Yeah, the tram is still there. You use your subway card or tap your phone.
Yeah.
It takes you to the Upper East Side.
So
town. So, yeah.
What do you do on the weekends for fun? Do you ski or hike, or what's your passion?
Yeah, I mean, in Canton, I played a lot of golf because you could play for no money at Ponca Puck.
Yeah.
Golf course, and I still try to play, but it's a bit tougher here in the city because you got to drive somewhere.
Yeah.
I try to play when I can. Roosevelt Island is a great place to run or to walk, so you can just walk around here. See a fair amount of movies. I like stand up a lot, so see comedy when I can.
So where do you see that? Down in the Village?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to the Village. I like the smaller shows, at the lesser known venues because they're just more affordable.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff in Brooklyn and Queens that's affordable and it has great stuff. So
Well, in New York, there's so many wonderful restaurants to get together and, get together with your friends and whatever. So you must know about well, tell us about Roosevelt Island. They have a lot of restaurants there or just a couple?
so the funny thing is Roosevelt Island doesn't have a lot of restaurants itself. Um, but you can go into Queens or go into Manhattan, as you know, and get all that. But yeah, so both my parents are from Brooklyn, so I have a couple of places I like a lot, but they're mainly in Brooklyn, which is a bit far from Roosevelt. So I spend a lot of time making my own stuff, or uh, there's a good falafel place down the street,
Yeah.
something like that. It just things are so expensive nowadays. Where if it doesn't blow me away, I'd rather just make it myself, or go to a taco truck or something.
Sure, sure.
So, Jonathan, what does the future hold for you? What do you see down the road that you would like to become involved in that maybe you aren't involved in right now?
Yeah. Well, I guess when I started this pursuit, it was always to make feature films, narrative feature films, and I've spent a great deal of time working as an assistant in the narrative world and working as a director of photography in the unscripted documentary world. But I would like to return as a director in the scripted universe. So yeah, I've got a screenplay in the works now that I'm working on that I'd love to shoot and produce in the next 2 years. Um, See where that goes. And trying not to, I guess, hold on to anything too heavily because with the way the business is changing, the industry is changing. Um, it's just you're lucky to have any day of work you get these days. So try to make the movies that I have in the back of my head, and if and when I can,
Mm-hmm.
and just appreciating whatever comes my way that I enjoy.
So have you written, how many movie scripts have you written? You must have had a couple already.
Yeah, so I mean, when I was a kid, I would bang those things out all the time, short films, but I've never completed a full feature film. So the piece I'm working on now is a feature. So it would be the first time I completed a piece of that length.
Well, give us a heads up as to what it's about. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's about it's centered around. I'll say this much: it is centered around Pog Municipal Golf Course.
Love
But
it.
I'll leave it at that because it was a very mad. If you've ever worked there as a kid, very magical place, and the fact that it was considered the worst golf course in the United States by Sports Illustrated at one point.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have any budget, right? I mean,
didn't have any budget. Yeah, and I think the worst is it's a name that doesn't really represent Ponky in the best light. But yeah, to your point, they just didn't have the budget, and that label doesn't mean anything to the folks who grew up going there every day.
Yeah.
In fact, it made it more fun and more accessible to folks who just couldn't afford, country clubs and things like that.
So what's that famous film with Bill Murray and Rodney Dangerfield about golf?
Oh, Caddyshack.
Caddyshack. So is it a humorous film or a serious film?
There's definitely humor in it, but the draft we have now focuses a bit more on coming of age and identity, and just kind of figuring out who you are. So it's not quite as broad as Caddyshack, but I mean, Ponky was loaded with shenanigans. If you'd ever
Ponky was famous because there were 2 golf courses there. It's 36 holes. I mean, the place was huge. I don't think there's any other golf course in Massachusetts with 36 holes.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, it was built. I mean, at one point it was a U.S. Open consideration.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it's amazing.
They
had a hockey rink too.
Yeah,
so I saw I'm trying to think of the title of the the Dedham Community Theater about 2 months ago. There was a film about based on a true story about golf in Mexico, and it's a feel good story, and I saw it myself, and it's a wonderful film, and you might put that on your list of things you want to check out because
Oh yeah.
it's a sort of a high school teacher who wanted to dreamed of being a great golfer, but then he got involved in this high school building the team and all the ups and downs and ins and outs. And
What was the name of the movie?
there you go. I don't know. It's something like, I think if you Google film about golf in Mexico,
Okay.
I think you'd get it. But it was very touching. I mean, I think you'd see which you obviously put a lot of thought into it, but sort of the potential of golf is sort of a metaphor of, teamwork, despite all the, and all the various cast of characters is predictable. But but it's based on a story where they triumphed over Texas A&M or something like that in the Texas amateur golf finals. And that is a documented fact. So it's not one of these things that's 90% true, 80% true, so.
Yeah.
But, they built their own golf course. I'm rambling on here a bit, but it was a good movie. And they sort of built their own holes because they had to practice. They were a bunch of hard scrabble Mexicans, I mean, they're perfectly bright and all that sort of stuff. So this is how I found out about it. So the high school person who loved golf and was dreaming about a team was driving along a road one day, and he saw this kid with a golf club in his hand hitting a ball, and the others were trying to dig sand traps, things like this. So that's what stopped the teacher who loved golf, and he started working with these kids who were in the high school, also in the high school, so he had them, real time. But, because golf is so hugely popular, I think you're onto something. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I think if it's one thing, a gift that a father could give to a son or a daughter is a real passion for golf. Because you figure golf, it's a social sport, really, because you talk to people playing with them for 2 or 3 hours. You sort of get to know them and you have a good sense of them, and you talk about it afterwards. Whereas a sport like tennis is sort of beating the ball back and forth at each other. It has a whole golf creates a great mood.
So you were writing scripts, right?
Mhm.
You're writing scripts, yes. And have you? So, how do you sell your scripts? Or aren't you in the? You don't want to sell them. You want to keep them.
Well, he needs an agent, right, or something like that to.
Yeah, that's a great question. I in that instance bring it to an agent, see if they could develop any type of conversation around it. But the movies I've worked on at independent features, a lot of the times they're just funded on their own, because they came up with the money themselves or some other way. And you can make a movie for such little money these days. You could shoot something in 16 days and then put it on streaming the next year. I just worked on a movie last year in France. It took place at a castle. The production company rented a castle, and they had the cast and crew stay there. And they also shot this horror comedy in the castle. And they made the whole movie for about, I think the budget was roughly $300,000, and they just they found a streaming deal, and it'll be on streaming at the end of next month, I believe. It's called Art of a Hit. And they just did it themselves, but they had the connections for distribution. So I guess to answer your question, I guess we'll see what the script calls for. So, if it calls for studio level funding, then I guess that would have to be the play, but who knows? I mean, we'll see where this ends.
Wow. Well, it's an exciting industry. I've written 5 movie scripts myself.
Really?
Yeah, I used to do when I was in the investment business. I used to write them as sort of a diversion on airplanes. So the technique I used to use was index cards, you know.
Yep.
So it's a marvelous way to do any writing project. Is just start sort of in a linear fashion chronologically with index cards, so you're not committing to some long document. So you sort of scene one, people there, and then you sort of what's next card is what's the first action going to happen and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of tools out there. I guess that's what I'm saying, to help writers move ahead on these projects. What software do you use? Do you just use Word, or do you have one of these fancy script programs?
Yeah, I have Final Draft, but I will outline in Google Docs. If I'm in a rut, I will sometimes write a synopsis and email it to myself. Like I'll just pull up Gmail and write an email to myself or to other folks who are helping me work on the script. And there's something about writing an email where it kind of gets you past writer's block in many ways, because I guess when you write an email, like the expectation is you're just going to fire this thing off and get it past you. Whereas if you open up Word or Google Docs, the expectation is, oh, I'm making this thing that requires a high level of craft and a high degree of scrutiny, and you can get stuck in the mud very easily that way. At least I can. So a technique that I've found that works for me is, I get stuck. Okay, well, what's this movie about? Just write a quick synopsis, and I'll just email it to myself or to some people I know.
I like it. That's sort of clever.
Easy.
It has a certain sense of detachment, even though you've written it.
Yeah, And if the expectation is I just need to get the idea to this person so they can start giving me feedback, it just makes it a lot easier. So.
Yeah, that's a good technique.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. So, what's the next question, Priscilla?
Oh. Tell me, what's your greatest satisfaction in this business?
I think it's just an appreciation for the folks that helped me get to this place. Because again, like in hindsight, everyone's got their own path, and a great mistake I made was trying to copy the paths of other filmmakers, but you can't do. I used to try to mimic Spielberg's timeline, and he was directing TV at 21 and so on. But you just can't mimic somebody else. It's entirely personalized. So I guess I get great satisfaction in just thinking about the number of people who helped me along the way, because it's really too many to count. And yeah, I think I'm lucky to have had, I guess, the visual intelligence, the capacity to imagine a shot. That's not up to me. That was a gift beyond my understanding. And then have people around me who were able to see that and foster it, offer me work that was connected to that bizarre ability. So I'd say that probably.
Well, the whole concept of passing it forward, people help you in your life and do it whatever, and they say, well, don't thank me, just do it, help somebody else. I think that's the biggest appreciation you can really give.
Yeah, that's true.
For a favor.
Yeah, and networking and developing relationships, that's really the key, I think, in the film business. Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah. It's all a community. It's funny, I grew up shooting stuff by myself, and as I've gotten older, I've learned that I'm usually not worried, but if I have to work by myself on something, like on a one-man band kind of thing, I am concerned the result just isn't going to be as high as if I have a crew of people around me, because I find that like the simplest way to deliver is to like maintain that mentality of being interested in the best way, not your own way.
Mhm.
You know, once you have a bunch of people around you who are really good at what they do, if you can find some way of finding the best answer amongst the people in that room, it's just going to be so much better than if one voice is kind of dominating everything. And I think oftentimes that could work. It does work. It has, but the if you consider the potential of what 10 people with a lifetime experience can do together versus one person with their one life experience,
Yeah.
balancing act. But you know, I don't know how you're going to get the best result without utilizing the other people in the room.
Mm.
Yeah. Got to do it. And so that's the good thing about Ed McDonough. I mean, remember when he was on the show, he was talking about, oh, there's this event in Boston in 2 weeks, and you go to that, I'll take you in, and this event. He had all these events that related to film and production, you know, at the local level. And he was, you know, he loved every minute of it, you know, and clearly that was a big part of his the magic that he could impart on his students was this idea that, you know, connect yourself to all these other people, because when you just live in the bubble or the cave, as they say, it's pretty hard, and your mind can play games with you. You know, get easy to get discouraged.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it's also, I guess, the hardest thing about working as a director or a director of photography is your relationship with the label you place on that position and how you let that position impact how you see yourself. Because if your understanding of what a director is someone who has all the answers all the time, it's going to be very difficult to be in a room full of people and to receive an idea that's better than yours.
Yeah.
And if you can figure out a way not to let the idea of the position prevent you from hearing good ideas, you're going to work, because you're going to have results every time you show up. But it's really easy to just start producing crappy work because you're in this mentality that it's your ideas are the highway all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to, you know.
That's a familiar.
Yeah.
So, John.
Well, we're getting the word. We have to wind down, Priscilla.
We do, because we just have 1 or 2 minutes left. What advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out?
I would say I think one of the best ways to get your own stuff made is to help others make their projects. So
Good
if you're
advice.
a kid, you know, help out, and nothing's below you. And suddenly you'll find that after a period of time, you've made a bunch of friends who are probably willing to help you out with your piece. And that community is what will make the difference between your piece being okay and your piece being really good.
Well, Jonathan, that's wonderful advice. We thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Today is July 8th or 7th. One of those two, 2024. And best of luck to you. Continued success in what you're doing. You obviously love what you do, so keep it up. And we thank you for being on our show today. Right, Bill?
We do, yeah. And it's good to see a contestant in the Hockomock Film Festival pursuing this wonderful career. And we'll check in with you in about a year and see if you join us for another show.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I appreciate what you guys do with the festival. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Great.
thank you again.
Thank
Bye-bye.